Alrighty guys, welcome back indeed to some more Path of Exile content. In this part of our episode for our playthrough, what we're going to focus in on is doing a major boss. We're going to be doing the Shaper. So I'm going to first off give you guys some suggestions and like improvements for some items that I can recommend for you guys, as at this point you've probably acquired more currency. You can go ahead and buy much better equipment. But again, keep in mind, you don't have to do some of these things if you can't afford it or you just got unlucky with your drops. That's totally fine too. Heck, in one of the boss fights, I'm still using the two-handed axe, which is totally fine too. Again, our playthrough session is going to be a little bit different, as everyone's going to get different drops. Everyone's going to have, not the same exact pieces of gear. I tried to mainly focus in on getting uniques, as it makes things easier. Now, I have acquired a lot of other items here, but you don't need it for the gameplay. In fact, the gameplay that you guys will see, I'm still using this older armor, and we're still using a lot of the older pieces of gear. However, I will give you suggestions to make your life even easier if you happen to have some of these items. So the most important thing I would try to focus in on replacing, if you happen to have like an Exalt Plus, replacing our item, the Rebuke of the Vaal. Remember, this item is like just a couple chaos, but if you happen to have an Exalt or a lot more, first thing I recommend getting is a much better weapon. Paradoxica is one of the best weapons in the entire game for the price. What you're really looking to get on this thing is increased physical damage, and if you can get crit strike chance, that's great, and increased quality. Basically sort them by the highest PDPS, which is physical damage, that you can get. Obviously, getting crit chance is going to be really good, especially since that is how we get our clone with the Savior. So this is the first thing that I would have as a priority to get immediately before really trying to do some of these, as it really will scale your damage a lot more than we were previously using with the Rebuke of the Vaal. But that's my first suggestion. Now, my other suggestion is, after that, I really like this item. It's kind of up to you. Again, if you're super rich, you can buy all these. Great. If not, that's totally fine. I wasn't even using this during the gameplay that you guys will see during the big Shaper boss fight. But Bottled Faith right here will significantly increase your damage. So it does basically the same thing as what we had before, which is this sulfur flask, but they're basically the same. You can see that they're both sulfur flasks, but this one over here is going to increase the size of the consecrated ground, which gives you some regen and it increases the size of it, making it so you're going to get extra critical strike chance against enemies who are on it. And then on top of that, consecrated ground created during effect applies 10% increased damage taken to enemies. So you get a huge amount of extra damage, not only extra crit, but you also get extra damage to the enemies. There's also an item called Cinder Swallow that you can get, but that can be quite pricey to get the correct roll. And I like this one because it also heals and it's like triple radius. It's nice. This can kind of range from like 2 exalts depending on the rolls that you want on it, but that's probably the next thing I would focus in on, because it kind of technically gives you survivability, as it just increases the area. But for the gameplay, I'm still using this because I want to make sure that everyone doesn't feel like, oh, I don't have this item, I can't play, right? Now, I was using this for the gameplay. Now, if you are super rich, there's a lot better items than this. Like this at this point is probably a lot cheaper. I think we bought this for like 50 chaos, but you can definitely get these for a lot cheaper at this point. But you basically want to have something that has life, and obviously you want it to have 6 sockets, unless you're using your axe or your two-handed whatever as your 6th link. You just want to make sure you still have some like armor and evasion. Ideally, if you can get both on it, plus some life. That's what you want on your armor. Now, I have gotten what's called an Explody Chest. Now, we'll kind of go over how to make this later down the line, but I think it's much easier for a lot of you guys to probably just buy it, because what's going to happen is if you want to get certain rolls on it, like life, you might be really disappointed if you try to what's called annul, which is remove something which is random, and you lose the explode. It's just going to feel really bad. So we'll get into that later once I get like the correct like harvest rolls that I can show you guys. But ideally what you're looking for is specifically an astral plate. If you're buying this, you just want the enemies you kill explode, dealing percent life as their physical damage. This one doesn't even have life on it, but these can get very expensive. You can get a pretty like mediocre one for just 2 exalts that just has enemies you kill explode. That's all it has on it, but that's all you really want. Now, this won't help you for the boss fights, but it will make your map clearing speeds absolutely different, because basically what happens, you kill one thing, they all just pop and it just melts everything. But for the gameplay's sake, again, I'm using this. It doesn't really matter for bosses, for most bosses, unless they spawn things. But if you do want to have like the best chance at clearing out content for bosses, an easy item, and there are better rare items, I get it, But the thing is that I try to recommend uniques as it makes it much easier for people just to type it in. One item that I really like personally is called Feral's Fur. It gives you what's called Aspect of the Cat, which will give you extra crit, and you have a chance where you just don't take any damage. Now, what it will give you is a passive, and I'm just going to go ahead and equip it now, which is called Aspect of the Cat, and I can activate it, and you can see it grants me attack, cast speed, and increased crit strike chance. It's really good, actually. But you will also have to have something on your item that will give you Aspect of the Cat. The armor gives you the ability so it doesn't reserve mana. It normally reserves 30% of your mana, but if you have something that has Aspect of the Cat on it, and then you also happen to have the chest, which makes it so it reserves no mana, it's basically free. And it's awesome. Basically what it does is it grants you frenzy and power charges so you can sustain during the boss fight, because normally we would only get our frenzy charges when we can kill some smaller enemies with blood rage. So it is actually a nice little buff. If you want to, you can get this. It can be like 2 exalts at the lowest, but if you want a 6 link, usually you're going to have to spend at least 3, but you know, sometimes you can get lucky for sure, but that's another item that can be good. But like I said, for the gameplay that you guys will see in a second, that's clearing out all the maps, we're using this. Heck, some of the gameplay, I think I'm using this, and we're even using one of the axes that we used a long time ago. It's just so I can basically show you guys we don't need certain items. Now, there's another thing I want to mention here. So this belt, don't bother trying to go for it right now, unless you're super, super rich. As I'm recording this after I've done all the bosses with my old gear, you'll see that we'll still have that rage be at 90. So what we can also try to get on our gear, because I remember saying that you should start qualitying up all of your gear, make sure everything's at like max quality, you know, and that includes your weapons, unless of course it's corrupted like this. But you want to quality up everything, and that can actually include your amulet if it's not a talisman, which will always be corrupted, but you can increase, let's say, the life on it, you can increase the attribute points on it, or you can even increase the resistances on it. Also crafted onto these rings that channel skills have minus to total mana cost. You don't have to have that, but it is kind of nicer to have just so you can hold it down in case you want to just hold it down basically, and there is no enemy to, let's say, leech mana off. But speaking of that, let me go ahead and open up the tree. Again, you don't have to copy this, I'm just showing you guys kind of as a reference so you can maybe get an idea. Feel free to again pause if you are trying to follow this for this specific build, as I know we started out with axe and then we swapped to dual blades. So if you're just using axe, you can still do all the content, no problem. It's just that I'm just trying to give you guys a variety of things just to show you more things that are you know, to be done in the game if you want to. Now, if you do have problems with mana cost, a really cheap ring that will allow you to do this is Praxis, but if you happen to have enough currency, you can buy rings that already have -2 total mana cost. Ideally, you just have to minus mana cost. A lot of them will say non-channeling, and because we're doing Cyclone for our build, but if you're using something else, you can get a lot of different rings that will make your life very easy for mana, but nonetheless, this is just a ring I'll mention. But also, I mentioned you can quality up your gear. So you can see this one says quality resistance modifier is 20%. Now, what we originally rolled is 13% chaos resistance, but it actually grants us 15 on the implicit, on the very top. So for 20%, we only gain 2 resistance. You might think that's really low, but that also increases the other ones of, let's say, 29 lightning resist. 29 went to 34. So that's another 5 lightning resist we got off of it. So it does add up, and it's a small amount, and you can buy these, or if you kill the metamorphs, they'll drop some of these like powders. They're called catalysts. The most expensive one is going to be the Fertile Catalyst, which I have actually put on this, and in total it granted us, instead of plus 40 life, we now have 48. So it's 8 life. It actually costs a lot for this, specifically the Fertile Catalyst, so I would get this at the last if you need it. But the other one can be a lot cheaper. Again, it depends on like what you want to roll on, let's say your ring or on your belt. These are, and technically your amulet as well, but if you happen to have a talisman, too bad. That's what you got to deal with. I haven't actually replaced my amulet at all. It's just very hard to replace that one. But also, yeah, qualifying up everything before you go into this fight. If you happen to have, you know, a bunch of currency lying around, that's what you want to try to do. But now let's finally get into going over what we're gonna have for our playthrough here. So what we're going to do is we're going to be doing some of these bosses, and so you can get these as drops, or if you go into a area where a red map can spawn, you can get these as a Zana map. So you'll do a map in a map. You can do these. Now these are quite difficult, and I'm going to go and actually show you guys kind of the mechanics of the boss fight. But I'm going to actually do this like and post. I'm going to actually edit it and kind of like maybe do some like voiceovers for some of these if I need to. The map does not really matter. It's like the same thing. You're just clearing out the map. But the boss has a unique mechanic, and I do have to share that with you guys because we're setting up to fight the Shaper. Basically, you do 4 of these maps. It's going to create these fragments. When you kill the boss, they'll drop a fragment. You put the fragment in, and you're going to do 4 of these. I know we have a 5th map socket, and I'll show you guys how to do that later. But we're going to go put in all of these, they're called like fragments. We're going to put all 4 in, and we're going to do what's called the Shaper, but let's go ahead and just start doing these bosses. Now, you can also buy these off of other players, and I would really recommend if you try to do these maps, don't get anything where it says like boss deals something extra more damage, boss has more health. They're hard. You know, but at least for the first time, don't do these super like juiced up, because failing honestly feels bad when, you know, you're playing any action RPG. So don't juice these up super hard. You can do them as like, let's say like white maps or something like that. So if I was to do these for the first time, this would be my recommendation. If these drop, just go ahead and scour it, make it easy. Make sure you can complete it, right? And if you want to do these later down the line, like, you know, super difficult, they have better drops, sure. But again, my recommendation, especially for like a beginner player, is don't actually go ahead and do that. And like I said, for the gameplay, not that the Headhunter is something we'll talk about later. It's a really cool item, and it really speeds up your gameplay for maps, but it doesn't help you out at bosses. And in all the gameplay, I would still be using like the old, what I consider bad gear. I'm not using Bottle Faith. We're not using, well, the Explode Chest doesn't matter for the bosses. This would be amazing for bosses though. But again, I'm just trying to show you guys that you can do it without having like really, really insane gear. It's just at this point, we have pretty insane gear. But let's go roll some gameplay. Boss over here, which actually has a unique mechanic where we actually will have to go through the smoke, which is the most important part. If I can actually see him, here we go. So after you like get him down low enough, he'll hide, and then he'll come back up. You have to kill some trash, which will also refill up your flasks. So important thing, you gotta go through all the smoke when he does this little like phase here. Where's the last one? Alright. There we go. We're gonna go away again. And the next rotation we'll have enough to get the totems back up. Fight the snake. They're all pretty easy though, to be honest. It's just the boss, and it's just knowing exactly that you gotta walk through all the little smoke, otherwise he'll just keep on hitting you. Get him down. The last bit. Then he'll peace out. How long is this boss fight? It's pretty short though. It's on average under 5 minutes. Alright.
I cannot do this yet.
This one's inflicting bleed, so I'm gonna pop my flask. At least hopefully my totem will still be alive by then. There we go. Alright, there we go. We got another. Ooh. There we go. So what we're going to do with these bosses, because these ones are special, we have to collect all 4 different fragments. They're actually very specific bosses. But once you combine all of them, you're going to throw them into the map device, and it'll open up a portal to like another boss. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and just voice over this part real quick. I just wanted to show, like, this was actually a little bit of some older footage, but this is still us using the two-handed axe. It's just more so that I wanted to build some confidence with some of you guys that were maybe still playing axe, or if your DPS wasn't that high, because that run right there with the Chimera was what I would consider, like, pretty fast, especially since we didn't even have, like, Bottle of Faith. There's a lot more items that we could definitely acquire to make it much faster, but don't feel like if I'm doing something super fast that, like, you know, your build sucks, or, you know, there's something wrong with it. It's just that, you know, there comes to a point where once you start leveling up a lot more, like, levels, everything starts to scale a little bit better. You can invest into more skill points, and there is a lot more min-maxing, and in this gameplay here, we're still using the other flask that is granting us like other damage as chaos damage as well. But again, you can still complete it. That's the whole point of doing this. And this boss was actually corrupted on this one, as this one was juiced up a little bit. But again, it's just to show you guys you can do it with either build. Alrighty, so next up is going to be the Minotaur. Now this one, I can definitely recommend getting some type of immunity to specifically shock. Now, I decided to roll with this one even though it had a bunch of what I would consider bad modifiers that I might not be able to like deal with super easy, like AoE weakness, which will actually hurt your resistances. But he can apply a shock. You want to be careful with these little lightning towers that can activate. He also burrows in the ground, and let me show you, look how much damage I took. If you stand in front of him, you can actually just tank his hits over and over again, but there's also these rocks that will fall down from the sky. I'm going to try to cut it up into areas where I want to show you how much damage he does, because he's going to hit us for a lot of damage right here. Like, if you start moving away from him, he will go in the ground and he'll just pop up and hit you really, really hard. But here, I'm just basically face tanking most of the stuff. And depending on your build, it might be better just to face tank some of the stuff, because again, if you move around, there are these areas that will shock you. And then on top of that, if he like goes in the ground and then pops up on you, you can just take a lot of damage. You can see how much damage he like is hitting us for in a lot of these like gameplay. I try to clip it so I can show you certain aspects and timings over here. And if you die, don't worry, it's totally fine. It's just, at this point, I'm not sure if we had like a very, very high DPS, but you can see I'm trying to show off most of the effects, because I could put on like, you know, Bottle of Faith, and like it makes things much, much faster, as well as just better gear overall. But I want to show it in a way where, again, you guys kind of feel like you can have more of a similar gameplay experience. But yeah, watch out for those lightning towers, and ideally, like I mentioned before, run the maps on easy. But pretty much most of the gameplay was just me sitting here spinning, and he does have a lot of health, I would say. The Minotaur and the Phoenix is the ones that I would consider to be a little bit more difficult, because Phoenix, well, that thing is just nasty. It hits really, really hard, and it's a little bit hard to dodge. Whereas this guy, I mean, if you have enough recovery with like Life Leech, you could kind of tank him, to be honest, I would say, over some of the other mechanics. But this one, we also had some bad modifiers on it, but that's the Minotaur. Slaydra, so we just have to watch out for these balls that come out. You can't really miss them. They're really slow. Here he is. Kind of hides for a little bit, but it will be alright. Standing behind is probably the smartest thing. A decent amount of damage. It's just really the balls you gotta watch out for. When he's doing that, we'll resummon our thing. Ooh, this is getting a little close. A little bit close. There we go. Right back in. Well, we should put like Coaling Strike on the Stone Golem or something. You know, on something.
My mana is gone.
And he's gone now. Mr. Phoenix. That was a little bit of lag there. Alright. Alright, so let me go ahead and actually voice over a little bit of this one because it is very important to dodge the Phoenix's blast. I previously, when I played the game, I actually just tanked it and it wasn't really that big of a deal. But I think that also because I'm melee versus if you're playing like a range build, you can deal with some of these smaller Phoenixes. You can see I'm trying not to get hit by the smaller Phoenixes and I'm just trying to focus in on the boss, which I would actually consider a mistake. You need to kill the smaller ones as like... they're really just going to stack up and make you like dodge too many things. And here's where like the Phoenix does his charge up attack. That attack, when you see that there's a little bit of a ring of fire on the ground, that's where it gets dangerous. You can see I actually died on this map multiple times, which is, you know, it's okay. And I'm glad I'm showing you guys that like I'm dying too. So if you die on any of these bosses, it's okay. But specifically the Phoenix, I just had a really rough time. I'm not sure if I did this one like earlier on when I didn't have like as much like, you know, stats or gear or whatever the case was. But this is my like last portal. And remember, you have a few portals. If you die, it's okay. The only downside is you lose your XP. But again, I think it's great that I'm dying, actually. And it depends if you make the Maven watch the fight, which I would recommend. Don't make the Maven watch any of these. You see, I almost died right there. But I'm trying to move around, trying to recover my HP using my war cry. And I think it's, like I said, it's good that this way it feels more relatable that, you know, if you guys die too. You see, I'm trying to kill some of the other Phoenixes that are being summoned, like the little birds. This way I can try to get my flash charges up. But that was a really rough one. And hey, you know what? As long as you end up getting the kill, that's what matters. I actually felt like this boss fight was harder than the Shaper. But now that we've got all of the pieces, we will be doing the Shaper. And I think I'm going to save that one for the next part of our playthrough. But I will still leave you guys off with another boss fight at the very end over here, as we're going to go ahead and do a metamorph, which is how we can get some of those powders, the catalysts. And it's just something I also wanted to mention really quick, as I did mention it in the very beginning of the video. Now, you don't always have to think about getting the one on the left, which will technically be more difficult, but it not necessarily will give you always better items, as I kind of prefer to get currency versus like a random unique, because unlike in Diablo, uniques aren't everything in this game, but you can see we can take down the Metamorph, what I would consider to be quite easy over here, compared to the Phoenix itself. I mean, it's not like it's ultra juiced up, but at the same time, I figured I'd give you guys some ending over here. You can see we have the oils over there. Which can be another mechanic of another form of currency to anoint certain things, but there we go. But anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you guys on the next part when we do the big boss fight, which is going to be Shaper coming up very soon. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.